was a calm afternoon in a quiet neighborhood where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. Cars passed occasionally, and distant laughter drifted through the air. Inside one family home, toys were scattered across the living room floor, and a children's show played softly on the television. From the outside, everything appeared completely normal. But behind that front door, something had gone terribly wrong. The house was too still, too silent. By the time anyone realized something was off, a tragedy had already unfolded, one that would leave investigators chasing answers for months. Concern started when repeated calls went unanswered. A family member decided to stop by, uneasy about the silence. The front door was slightly open, just enough to raise alarm. Inside, the living room showed signs of chaos. An overturned chair, a broken lamp, scattered items across the floor. She was unresponsive in the center of the room, while her 4 toddler quadruplets sat nearby, confused and restless. Within minutes, police arrived and began treating the home as a crime scene. Detectives quickly noticed evidence of a struggle. Furniture had been moved, objects knocked over. It didn't look random. It looked desperate, like someone had tried to fight back. Yet there were no signs of forced entry. The doors and windows were secure. Whoever had entered that home likely wasn't a stranger breaking in. This was someone who had been allowed inside, or someone who knew exactly how to get in. Investigators began interviewing those closest to her. Friends described her as protective and devoted to her children. But one detail stood out: a custody battle that had lasted nearly a decade. Her former partner had been locked in a long legal dispute filled with tension and resentment. On paper, it looked like motive. But detectives needed more than history. They needed solid evidence linking someone to the scene. For weeks, forensic tests provided little clarity, and no strong witnesses came forward. Each promising lead seemed to fade just as quickly as it appeared. The media attention began to slow, and the case gradually lost momentum. Detectives feared the worst, that this crime might remain unsolved. Somewhere, someone believed they had covered their tracks perfectly. Months passed with little progress. Detectives revisited old notes, replayed interviews, and re-examined the timeline, hoping they had missed something small but important. Sometimes cases don't break because of big evidence, but because of one forgotten detail. And in this case, that detail was about to come from someone no one expected. A local gardener who worked a few houses down that afternoon contacted police. At first, he didn't think what he saw mattered, but the image had stayed in his mind. He remembered a car parked strangely near the victim's home. It didn't belong to anyone in the neighborhood. The driver stayed inside. What truly stuck with him was the license plate. Something about the numbers caught his attention, and without realizing it, he repeated them in his head. When detectives asked him to recall it, he provided a partial plate. It wasn't complete, but it was enough to start searching. Police ran the partial plate through their database. After narrowing down possibilities, one vehicle stood out. It was registered to a man with a minor criminal history. He wasn't connected to the victim, at least not publicly. But now, detectives finally had a name to look at. The man claimed he had never met her. He said his car had been somewhere else that day, but his story changed twice during questioning. Detectives began digging into his phone records, financial activity, and recent movements. more they looked, the more suspicious things became. Phone data revealed multiple calls between him and a prepaid number in the days leading up to the crime. The calls stopped immediately afterward. That wasn't random. Someone had been communicating with him right before everything happened. Financial records showed unusual deposits into his account. The payments were spaced out and labeled vaguely. To investigators, it looked like compensation. Not for a job application, not for a loan, but for something planned. Tracing the prepaid number led detectives to a surprising discovery. The number had been purchased using false information, but it connected back to someone familiar, someone tied indirectly to the long custody battle, someone who had stayed out of sight. This individual had no public disputes with the victim, no direct history of conflict. On the surface, there was no reason for involvement. But deeper investigation revealed private conversations and meetings that had never been disclosed. A hidden alliance was forming in the background. Surveillance footage from nearby streets confirmed the suspect's vehicle entering the neighborhood around the estimated time of the crime. This wasn't coincidence, it was planned. The timing matched the victim's routine almost perfectly. Under further questioning, the small-time offender's confidence began to fade. His timeline didn't match the digital evidence. Confronted with the phone records and bank deposits, he struggled to explain why someone had been paying him days before the crime.
His timeline didn't match the digital evidence. Confronted with the phone records and bank deposits, he struggled to explain why someone had been paying him days before the crime. Detectives increased the pressure. They presented the evidence step by step, closing in on inconsistencies. Eventually, he admitted he had been hired, but claimed he didn't know the situation would escalate. He insisted someone else had orchestrated everything. The investigation shifted focus to the alleged mastermind. Financial links and communication records tied this person directly to the hired offender. What once looked like a random act now appeared calculated, planned carefully, executed quietly. Investigators uncovered years of resentment tied to the custody battle, court losses, financial strain, emotional anger that never faded. What began as a legal fight had quietly transformed into something darker, an obsession with control and revenge. With enough evidence gathered, police made multiple arrests. The small-time offender was taken into custody first. Soon after, the alleged mastermind was arrested as well, shocked that the trail had led back to them. Facing overwhelming evidence, the hired offender admitted he had been paid to confront her. He claimed things spiraled out of control. Whether intentional or reckless, the result was irreversible, and now both men faced serious charges. In court, prosecutors laid out the timeline: calls, payments, surveillance, and the gardener's testimony, each piece connected like a puzzle. The defense argued doubt, but the digital trail was difficult to ignore. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: guilty. The courtroom fell silent as justice was finally delivered. The mastermind's attempt to distance themselves had failed. The truth had caught up. Investigators later said the case might have remained unsolved without one memory: a gardener noticing a car that didn't belong. A partial license plate became the thread that unraveled the entire plan. Today, the case is remembered not only for its tragedy, but for the lesson it left behind. No detail is too small, no memory insignificant. Because sometimes justice doesn't begin with a confession or a witness, it begins with a single license plate that refused to be forgotten.